I'm actually in the process of buying a house, and housing is absolutely insane. All these corporate companies are buying up real estate.
Corporate landlords just owning everything in America, individual landlords disappearing.
Interest rates are going up, the amount of offers are going down.
Almost impossible for people to rent when they're making decent money, but also it's impossible to buy.
We've had significant affordability pressures. The monthly payment for a new home is up slightly over 40%.
Is the housing market peaked?
This is the first time in the last 4 years that we have seen a year-over-year increase of more than 1% of active listings with price drops. It's an inflection point.
Mortgage home applications are down 75%. Rents are getting super high. Corporations are buying up a ton of real estate. It's almost like the American dream is becoming the American nightmare. Hey guys, welcome. This is one of the new segments that we're doing on the channel. We'll be taking a look at news in the recent past and see how that relates to you financially, from your career perspective, from investing money, or from not losing money or saving money. With that said, before we dive into the topics for today, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you subscribe. We release new episodes on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Also, make sure you follow us on social media. All the links can be found in the description. And last but not least, make sure you hit that like button. I don't even know if that's cool anymore, but hit the like button, hit the love button. With me today is my wonderful producer. Olivia, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Olivia. I help produce this news segment for New Rules and keep Keril on track.
Keep me on track, keep me well behaved. So with that said, let's dive in. I'm actually in the process of buying a house, and I'm excited about it. It made me do some research, and I started to look at what's going on in the market, and housing is absolutely insane. One thing that kept happening as I kept putting offers in on houses is people would bid up the price. And I ended up putting in a couple offers, and then I ended up just canceling those offers because I didn't really feel good about overpaying for real estate. And then that led me to another train of thought, which was, damn, if I work for Google and I think the houses are super expensive, what is somebody who makes $100,000 or less? How are they able to bid up, go into this housing market and compete and actually gain a house or get a house for them and their family or wherever they are in the stage of their life? That's what this segment is really based off of, the research that I've done and just some of the ideas and thoughts that I had. So first, we're going to talk about how crazy rents are currently and how they're going up. Then we'll talk about what's going on with the housing market. Are we in a housing bubble? Should you be looking at a house now? And I'll give you my take and my opinion on it towards the end.
Corporate landlords just owning everything in America, individual landlords disappearing, people not having to pay their rent. So then a lot of these landlords have to sell their properties. And then, who comes in and buys them? BlackRock or Blackstone, same thing, right? Blackstone buys 12,000 Sunbelt apartments for $5.8 billion. This is from Zero Hedge. Wall Street won't rest until it becomes the biggest and perhaps only landlord in the U.S. On Wednesday, Blackstone cemented its position as America's largest residential and commercial landlord by buying apartment owner preferred apartment communities in a deal valued at $5.8 billion, demonstrating the unstoppable investor demand for multifamily, i.e. rental properties in Sunbelt states. According to Wall Street Journal, Blackstone will pay $25 a share in cash for the Atlanta-based real estate investment trust. That represents a premium of roughly 39% over the closing price on February 9th, the day before Bloomberg News reported the REIT was exploring options, including a sale. So the deal includes more than 40 rental apartment properties, including 12,000 units in states including Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia. That's what they mean by Sunbelt. Preferred Apartment also owns 54 grocery-anchored shopping centers anchored by grocery stores, probably like Publix. About 70% of the deal's value is in its rental apartments. Wow. So Blackstone Now they're ramping up its bet on U.S. rental housing. Blackstone, I want you to think about it. This is fun.
So wow, that's absolutely insane. As I was like looking at like housing, one of the things I kept noticing, I'm like, who's actually buying all this stuff? Like, who has the money to like buy it? You know, like I'm like, if you make multiple six figures and you're still getting priced out, like who's buying it? And I think the answer is like some I came across this Tim Dillon article that we're watching now. Then I also like started to do some research and like look up BlackRock, and they're buying everything. So it's crazy that all these corporate companies are buying up real estate. And so that kind of got me a little nervous to where I'm like, damn, I got to hurry up and buy to make sure that I don't get priced out or would never be able to buy a home. And it's actually funny. I'm talking to, you're right here, Olivia. Like you and I were talking about like before we hit play, and you were talking about like Vancouver and how it's like absolutely impossible to even buy there because the international investors have already bought everything up. And based on this article, it seems like the same thing's happening in the US, just at a slower rate, but it's going to be a point where nobody can actually buy anything.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So where I'm from in Vancouver, ever since I was a kid, it's the price to buy a house is been skyrocketing and skyrocketing. But what's been happening there is there's lots of international buyers, but what it's doing is it's cutting out all the locals. And rent prices are increasing. My dad just moved, and the reason why he was moving was because his rent increased by $1,500 a month. And he was already paying a lot for a 2-bedroom apartment. So it's just like these things with the rent prices, but also people buying up properties, it's making it almost impossible for people to rent when they're making decent money. But also it's impossible to buy. Someone like me who's 27, I can never imagine to buy in Vancouver. It's just, for me, it's not a goal in my mind because I've already kind of thought, well, I'm already priced out. It's just not going to happen.
So, I wonder I don't know what's going to happen, because the way I think about stuff like this, I'm getting up to boomer age these days, or at least I think I am. And so I start thinking about like 20 years from now, and I'm like, no matter how my work life goes, like at some point you're unable to work anymore. And for most Americans, or most people in the world, like you're not going to be like, oh, I'm sitting on like a whole bunch of millions of dollars, right? And so ideally you would have your place paid for so that you wouldn't have any expenses outside of, doing like old lady and old man stuff, going to the grocery store, picking up groceries, going to the YMCA. I used to be a lifeguard. So you go to the YMCA, you see all the old people like doing like little calisthenics and the water ballerina stuff. If you're paying rent that can price hike, that could totally change your whole world. It makes it impossible. So, I have no idea what's going to happen, but that was just a big thing. I don't think we're going to solve it on this segment, but that's something to think about as you think about like your life plan. Like, what are you going to do in this housing market now that BlackRock is buying up all this property? Let's listen to this a little bit more.
So listen to this. Blackstone has been aggressively ramping up its bet on U.S. rental housing. The firm has agreed to buy 2 other companies that own apartments in the past 2 months, building up its presence in states including Colorado, Texas, Arizona, and Georgia. Well, what do they mean by that? Ramping up its bet on U.S. rental housing. Well, they're betting, and they're correct, that people are not going to be able to own homes, or that more people in the future are going to rent. This is their bet. And they're probably correct, because the cost of home ownership in this country is, ludicrous, especially in places where you'd want to live. So companies like Blackstone go, listen, the future is going to be the gig economy, where you have people that hop from gig to gig, and they're going to be permanent renters, and that's what it's going to be. They're not going to own property. They may not even own a car. They're going to use services like Uber and Lyft, and they're going to rent an apartment. They're not going to own much of anything. And according to that article, you're going to love it. You're going to be happy. And, the American dream is turning from home ownership and family to something else entirely. It's really what it's becoming. It used to be the American dream, as stated. Now, how possible it was and, you know, whether it was legit then, certainly more legit seeming than now.
But I think it's absolutely insane to me. Even though, you know, like this segment is talking about real estate, it's almost like the American dream is becoming the American nightmare, because if you can only rent and you always have to put out money, how do you ever like retire if you're always on the treadmill? I think the goal for most people is to get off of the treadmill at some point, meaning like, hey, like I've lived a good life, I've saved, I've done some great things. I bought a house, I paid my house off. I'm gonna go live in Florida or Arizona, and I'm gonna just, you know, like walk along the paths and ride my bike on Tuesday and go to the YMCA. Seems like that's not gonna be an option anymore. I don't know the solution of it, but just something that we got, you know, like all of us need to think about. And I don't know if we're gonna solve it today. There's no answer. The fact that these big corporations are buying everything up. Anyway, on to the next segment. You guys get it. Corporations are buying up real estate and properties like right now. BlackRock's gonna own everything. And the only option is going to be to rent or pay an exorbitant amount of money. And the one thing I realized, like in my housing search, is that you will not compete and you will not win competing with corporations. You just won't. You're going to overpay for something and not have the money to do it and run out of budget. The amount of money you'll be spending on housing will not allow you to do anything else. So just a warning, something you need to think about. All right, so let's move on to the purpose of this whole thing is like, what the hell is happening in the housing market? Even though, you know, interest rates were going up and then prices hadn't come down like a whole bunch, but I ended up putting like an offer in to on a house. Was it the perfect time to buy? For me, it was. Right? I didn't overbid on a house. I got the house at listing. Interest rates are going up. I didn't know like where they were going to be. So like my opinion is when you need a house, you need a house. And then you need to make it work for you. So whether you need to buy out, like if you can afford it and you have the down payment, yes, when the rates were at 3%, I could buy a little more house. But as the rates went up, I just had to look a little bit further out as opposed to a little bit further in. But at the end of the day, what is the purpose of a house? Somewhere to lay my head, somewhere to put some money as far as an investment for retirement. And then also so I could work and then do like my podcasting and sleep and then take care of dogs. At least that's my future life is coming up. But let's look at what some other people are saying about the real estate market.
Our April home building survey really showed an inflection point of demand starting to moderate. We've had significant affordability pressures. The monthly payment for a new home is up slightly over 40%. And I think the surge in rates is now finally giving people pause. Some of it is related to just hesitancy that they don't want to be buying at the top. But I think more than anything, it's about affordability. Our survey did see a pickup in cancellation rates. Admittedly, we didn't expect much, and it's well below normal. But I think there's been so much embedded equity, so we didn't expect a lot of cancellations, but it did tick higher. We did see a tick up in incentives. And some of the cancellations, by the way, we've heard from some of the hotter markets were actually private investors. So I think you're seeing a pause. Now, admittedly, it's mixed. There's markets that remain red hot. So we're seeing an inflection point.
The question that's being asked like right now is the housing market peaked? Based on like the research I've done and like based on like what I'm looking at, the housing market has peaked. And so if you can get a good deal, right, like I think housing prices are going down. And the way I understand it, with inflation and the interest rates, that's only going to be going up. And so there's this small window. If you can afford it, once again, like look at buying a house now. And then I'll point to, right, so I'm not saying that from the perspective of have all this money, like go buy a house, right? Like that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying look at some of the trends that are happening like in the market, and if you're in a position to, because private investors, BlackRock, like all these companies are buying up everything. Interest rates are going up. It's just going to be even less affordable to actually buy a house like in the near future. The good thing about now, or this specific inflection point, is the fact that it's less bids going into the house, like as Ivy Zellman was saying. And she's way richer and way smarter than me in like real estate. But you could just go on Redfin and just see like the housing prices drop. Meaning that now that there's less offers being put in, houses aren't getting bid up, 50 to 100 grand more. And so there's a chance if you can deal with a 5% interest rate where you don't have to necessarily bid up on a house and you could get it at market, even though the market might dip a little bit, at least you won't be in as much debt per se. And then if we get lucky, where the interest rates fall at some point in the next 2 years and you can refinance, then you're in a better position. You didn't overpay for the house, or you overpay slightly, and now your interest rate's low and you're in a house that you can actually afford with a low interest rate.
This is the first time in the last 4 years that we have seen a year-over-year increase of more than 1% of active listings with price drops. It's an inflection point, and this is sort of something that we start looking at and we say, okay, well, we've got an inflection point to the upside in price drops. Okay, we're starting to see that. That doesn't mean it's going to sustain, but it's just one of those early signs. It's like, okay, that's something to pay attention to. But see, real estate, in my opinion, is one of those things that in order to really understand what's going on in the market, you've got to look beyond larger statistics. You could use those as clues to either corroborate what you're seeing or to be sort of a weapon that says, no, what I'm seeing or feeling is wrong. But real estate, it's always local. However, national impacts like interest rates going up, 3% in a matter of 4 months will be felt in every local market. But here are some of the things that I'm seeing now. So back in January, I made a prediction that we would see excess demand in housing evaporate, but that would take time. That would probably take until the end of 2022 because you go through a cycle. First, you get interest rates that go up in January and February, and then what happens is you still have people who have their rates locked in who are closing deals in February and March. But then the people who are looking for new homes to buy in February and March, who would actually be closing in April and May, are people who say, well, I have a higher interest rate to deal with now, and rates are going up. I may as well get in now before rates go up even further. So you have this excess excitement to get in quickly, right? That's beginning to wane. First of all, the people who had low rates locked in from December and early January, that's over now. The people who are hunting in March and April, who are excited about, okay, let's get in before the housing market sees rates go up even further, they're finding places. And so now we're at this potential tipping point where the next phase of the housing market would be, well, if more sellers decide, or even a consistent amount of sellers, as in the same amount of sellers we have been seeing, decide to put their properties on the market. Even if we stay stable, if we end up with fewer buyers now who are willing to get mortgages at 6%, then you have a problem.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So mortgage home applications are down 75%. Obviously, because now that the mortgage rates are going up, people can afford less home. And some are just not buying a home at all. I think I'm at the inflection point where I was not necessarily in a rush. Obviously, the perfect time to buy a home would have been 2 years ago. I never like to be rushed to do anything. I like to think through things. And so this is one of those things where, yes, the mortgage rate, Papa Jerome Powell, when he started pushing up the mortgage rates, that definitely, put some pep in my step or put a fire under my seat or whatever analogy or metaphor you want to use. And I started to look. And so I'm locked in at, I think, a 5% rate or something along those lines. If the rate got hiked up to 7, would I still buy? I don't know. At some point, at some inflection point, you have to just rent and just wait until the market cools off. So here's a good recap or takeaways from this video. The first one is, no matter where you are in life, I think it's time to at least take a look at what you're going to do about your housing situation. Based on the trends that we're seeing, institutional buyers are buying our properties. Private investors are buying our properties. And Olivia, you talked about in Vancouver, it gets to a point where owning is not even an option. And so with that said, right, I know you just can't magically make more money, right? Even in this conversation, I'm thinking most of us just have to move. I don't think it's any other option besides finding a place where you can get an affordable house, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to retire. Period. You know what I'm saying? I was talking to a buddy, and he was like, yo, would you move? And I was like, no. Now thinking about it, yes, I can afford a house in the area that I live in, which is the Washington, D.C. area. But if I couldn't, I would have to look at moving to Texas and moving somewhere far out where the housing market isn't as competitive and I can actually afford, because that's the only place that you can actually buy a house, pay off your house, and actually retire. And in some places like Vancouver and some of the metropolitan areas, it's not going to make any sense ever. That's the first main trend that I'm seeing that should be pointed out and something you should think about in your financial future over the next couple of years. The second one is, if you're in a position to buy in the next 3 to 6 months, then you should do so. Mainly because the interest rates are going up, but the amount of mortgage people that are putting in for mortgage homes, or I guess the offers going in on homes, are lower. So you don't have to super overpay, or it's not getting bidded up where you're paying like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50%, sometimes, 60% over asking price, which to me is totally ridiculous. Never ever bid up and be, be the one that, that pays the highest price for something that isn't worth that value. To me, it totally isn't worth it. Hopefully you got the takeaways from this video. Rents are getting super high. Corporations are buying up a ton of real estate. It's going to make it harder to own a home. So either you need to put together a plan for owning a home or plan to move. We're all We're all going to move to Texas or to Wyoming with Kanye and just live off of the land. My second takeaway is, if you have money to afford a house, interest rates are going up. The amount of offers are going down, meaning that you don't have to bid up as much. So it would be a good time to get in before the interest rates spike even higher. You can always find a place to rent until the housing market cools off, or maybe look to move. I know that's kind of like a drastic thing. If you're going to retire at some point, you don't want to be paying BlackRock and then hiking your rent 15-20% when you're on a fixed income. Just wanted to share some trends in the market. Hopefully you got something out of this. If you like stuff like this, make sure you find the subscribe button. If you're watching this video on our blog, you can put your email address in or something along those lines. And every time we release a new video, you'll receive that content directly in your inbox. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. And until the next time you watch a video of ours, stay trapping. Nope, that was a horrible outro. All right, goodbye.